Imagine waking up one day to discover that civilization as we know it is on the brink of collapse. Not because of a threat we can see and fight directly, but because of decisions made behind closed doors, silent algorithms predicting a future that few are prepared to face. Artificial intelligence, created to serve mankind, is now revealing something unsettling. The last war in history may be closer than we think. The truth is, no one wants to believe that the end could be so near. We'd rather hold on to the hope that humanity will always find a way to avoid the worst. But what if, this time, there's no more time left? What if the signs are already in front of us? Yet we are so distracted by the chaos of everyday life that we simply choose to ignore them. Great civilizations of the past crumbled because they believed there would always be a way out. But AI, fueled by data and historical patterns, is already predicting an outcome that few are willing to admit. World leaders speak of security, stability, and progress, but behind the scenes, the wheels of destruction are already in motion. The arms race has never been more advanced. The same technology that could bring peace is being used to amplify war. Entire nations are controlled by interests that do not see human life as a priority. And now, AI is merely confirming what the most observant have long suspected. The greatest conflict in history may be closer than we imagine. But there is something even more terrifying. What if this war is not just between nations? What if we are entering a battle that goes beyond weapons, beyond technology, beyond what our eyes can see? The scriptures have long warned of a time when humanity would turn against itself, when truth would be distorted, when those who rule the world would be blind to the coming destruction. Are we living in that time now? Stay with me until the end of this message. Because beyond exposing this urgent truth, I want to pray for you. Pray that your mind and heart remain steadfast in what truly matters. If we are standing on the edge of the last war in history, we cannot be mere spectators. Do not leave without receiving this prayer, because God may be calling you to something far greater than you ever imagined. Humanity has always sought to understand the future, whether through science, observing nature, or divine revelations. With the advancement of artificial intelligence, this pursuit has taken on a new dimension. Today, algorithms process massive amounts of data, analyze historical patterns, and project future outcomes based on past events. What was once merely a human effort to predict the future has now become a potentially more precise, yet unsettling reality. As described in Daniel 12:4, in the end times, knowledge would increase, and indeed, AI has become such a sophisticated tool of calculation that it can predict geopolitical trends and warn of a possible Third World War. But the real question is not just whether these predictions are accurate, but whether we are prepared to deal with what they indicate. Tensions between nations have always existed, but history has shown that certain moments push latent conflicts to the point of inevitability. Today, military rivalries, economic disputes, and global political crises are shaping an unstable landscape. AI detects patterns of alliances and diplomatic fractures, identifies financial and military crises, and warns of a potential global collapse. Jesus, in Matthew 24:6-7, warned that we would hear of wars and rumors of wars, but that the end was not yet. However, he also mentioned that nations would rise against nations, and that there would be famines, plagues, and earthquakes in various places. This suggests that the recurrence of certain patterns throughout history is not random, but a cyclical process. One that is now being identified by technological tools with frightening precision. Despite AI's advancements in identifying crises, its ability to predict future events with absolute certainty remains questionable. After all, history is not solely shaped by mathematical probabilities, but also by human decisions and unforeseen factors. The Bible teaches us that it is God who truly knows the future, as stated in Isaiah 46:10. I make known the end from the beginning, from ancient times, what is still to come. While technology can offer predictions based on statistics, it cannot account for divine intervention or the spiritual dimensions that govern world events. This leads us to an important reflection. Are we so focused on human predictions that we ignore the signs that were revealed centuries ago? When we observe the modern world, we see that humanity, in many ways, continues to follow the same patterns that led to great catastrophes in the past. Arrogance, the relentless pursuit of power, and indifference to warnings are traits that have preceded the fall of empires and the collapse of civilizations. Proverbs 16:18 reminds us, "Pride goes before destruction, a haughty spirit before a fall." What AI is revealing today may simply be a reflection of the path humanity has chosen to walk. Still, we have the responsibility to discern the times and seek guidance beyond statistics, for only wisdom from above can lead us through chaos. If AI has detected patterns that indicate an imminent global conflict, it means the signs have been present for a long time. Technology merely highlights what many refuse to see. As Luke 12:56 states, Jesus rebuked those who could predict changes in the weather but failed to discern the spiritual signs around them. The greatest danger is not just the war predicted by advanced systems, but the blindness of those who ignore the warnings God has given throughout history. AI may serve as a valuable tool to alert us, but without a genuine transformation of the human heart, no calculation or projection will change the destiny that many are choosing for themselves. In this scenario, the real question is not whether AI can predict the future with absolute accuracy, but whether we are willing to listen to the warnings that history and the Word of God have already given us. Humanity walks a fine line between the pursuit of peace and the self-destructive tendency to repeat the mistakes of the past. Amid the uncertainty of what is to come, another question becomes inevitable. If war is truly imminent, do we have the resources to face it? Or are we already collapsing before the first attack is even launched? Technological advancement has always brought with it a moral and strategic dilemma. What once served to facilitate communication, optimize processes, and expand human knowledge has now become a weapon of war with devastating potential. Cyber warfare, once limited to isolated attacks on financial and governmental systems, has evolved into a threat capable of paralyzing entire civilizations in a matter of seconds. As Ecclesiastes 1:9 states, "What has been will be again, what has been done will be done again. There is nothing new under the sun." The pursuit of power and dominance has always been part of human history, but now the battle is no longer fought with swords or visible armies. The enemy hides behind lines of code, algorithms, and invisible infiltrations capable of shutting down power grids, compromising military infrastructures, and sowing chaos without a single shot being fired. Artificial intelligence plays a central role in this new form of warfare. While in the past, strategy depended on human intellect and the experience of military commanders, today, algorithms analyze data, anticipate attacks, and coordinate operations without human interference. In Matthew 24, Jesus speaks of a time when knowledge would multiply, but with it would come deception and schemes difficult to discern. AI, while offering advancements in defense and security, can also be used to manipulate, confuse, and destroy. Entire nations can be destabilized through controlled disinformation, where deepfakes, hyper-realistic simulations, and misdirection campaigns turn populations against their own leaders. The danger is not just in autonomous weapons replacing soldiers, but in the erosion of truth itself, where reality becomes malleable and trust in institutions collapses, exactly as the adversary of our souls has attempted to do from the very beginning. EMP, electromagnetic pulse attacks, are one of the deadliest weapons in this invisible war. Unlike traditional nuclear explosions, which devastate cities with fire and radiation, An EMP can dismantle a country's infrastructure without leaving visible destruction. With a single high-altitude detonation, power grids, satellites, communication systems, and even vehicles could be instantly rendered useless. Isaiah 24 describes a scenario in which the earth reels like a drunkard, its rebellion weighs it down, and it falls, never to rise again. This perfectly illustrates the impact of an EMP attack. In an instant, the modern world, entirely dependent on electricity, is thrust into a pre-industrial state. Hospitals lose power, food rots in warehouses without refrigeration, cities are plunged into darkness, and entire populations are left struggling to survive without any means of communication or coordination. The collapse would not stem solely from the absence of technology, but from human fragility in the face of uncertainty. When social and economic systems break down, the true nature of humanity is exposed. As Jeremiah 17:9 warns, "The heart is deceitful above all things and beyond cure. Who can understand it?" Without functioning laws, without operational governments, and without public security, social bonds disintegrate quickly, panic spreads, and with it, chaos. What was once an organized society turns into an environment of extreme survival, where trust becomes a luxury and morality is put to the test. However, while disorder grips the world, those who place their faith in something greater than technology remain unshaken, for they know that there is a refuge that cannot be erased by any electrical failure. Humanity's greatest illusion has always been believing that technological progress would bring ultimate security. However, the same advancements that make life easier are also the ones that make it more vulnerable. As Psalm 127:1 states, "Unless the Lord builds the house, the builders labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the guards stand watch in vain." No digital fortress, no artificial defense system, and no advanced technology can guarantee peace and stability if the foundation of a nation is corrupted. The world is shifting toward trusting machines more than morality, automation more than discernment, and digital strategy more than the fear of God. When this reversal of values reaches its peak, the consequences become inevitable, and human knowledge itself turns against those who created it. Technology, which was meant to be a tool for progress, now dictates the rhythm of wars and determines the fate of nations. Those who control the algorithms control the narratives. Those who dominate digital systems control the world. But while the eyes of the world remain fixed on battles fought in cyberspace, an even older war continues to be ignored. There is a conflict far greater than what can be seen on screens. A battle not measured in megabytes or drones, but in choices that transcend the tangible. If humanity has lost control over the technology it created, what can be said of that which cannot be controlled by men? Modern society has built its stability on a fragile foundation, sustained by interdependent systems that provide energy, supply chains, and communication. However, a single systemic failure could trigger a domino effect, leading to total collapse. A coordinated attack, whether through cyber warfare, an electromagnetic pulse, EMP, or digital sabotage, could shut down power grids, disrupt data flows, and paralyze supply chains. The extreme dependence on technology, once seen as an irreversible advancement, would quickly become humanity's greatest weakness. As Jeremiah 2:13 describes, "My people have committed two sins. They have forsaken me, the spring of living water, and have dug their own cisterns, broken cisterns that cannot hold water." The modern world has placed its trust in its own strength but ignored its vulnerability. And when crisis strikes, many will realize too late that they have built their security on structures that cannot sustain them. Food shortages would be one of the first and most devastating consequences of such a collapse. With transportation disrupted and logistical systems down, supplies would run out quickly and desperation would take hold of the population. What was once a simple item on a grocery store shelf would become a currency of survival. In Matthew 6, Jesus reminds us that God provides for his people, yet humanity, in its greed, has cultivated a society of waste and imbalance, where a few accumulate excess while many lack the essentials. When inflation skyrockets and money loses its value, those who once relied on abundance will realize that survival is not about material wealth, but about the wisdom of those who understand the times and prepare accordingly. The financial system, reliant on digital transactions and interconnected markets, would collapse almost instantly. Hyperinflation would turn money into worthless paper, and banks, cut off from their networks, would become impenetrable fortresses, unable to provide even the basic necessities of the economy. As Revelation 6:6 foretells, a quart of wheat for a denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, and do not damage the oil and the wine. A time will come when a full day's wages will barely be enough to buy a small portion of food, as the cost of survival surpasses the purchasing power of the masses. The global economy, built on speculation and reckless consumption, would quickly crumble under the weight of an unprecedented crisis. While some would attempt to protect what little they have, others would resort to force to obtain what they lack. Nations once upheld by diplomatic agreements and trade alliances would deteriorate into territories of conflict and chaos. The absence of order and security would give way to a societal collapse that few are prepared to face. Amid panic and uncertainty, moral values would become volatile, and the instinct for survival would override any sense of justice. As Judges 21:25 describes, in those days, Israel had no king. Everyone did as they saw fit. Without laws to contain desperation, and without leaders to restore order, anarchy would take over the streets. Groups would form in search of protection, but fragile alliances would constantly fall apart due to the struggle for power and remaining resources. The strongest would dictate the rules, while the most vulnerable would suffer the consequences of a society that, in a matter of days, would regress by centuries. The psychological impact of such a collapse could not be underestimated. Fear, uncertainty, and emotional exhaustion would erode people's sanity, making survival as much a mental battle as a physical one. As Isaiah 41:10 reminds us, "Do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand." But in times of crisis, those without a strong foundation of faith and hope would quickly succumb to despair. Modern society, accustomed to comfort and predictability, has not been prepared for prolonged suffering. Without support systems, direction, or any prospects for restoration, many would lose the will to fight, surrendering to hopelessness before even facing the full reality of what is to come. The true test would not only lie in the scarcity of resources, but in the resilience of those enduring the crisis. Society would enter a phase of purification where the true nature of the human heart would be revealed. As Luke describes, faith is not tested in times of abundance, but in adversity. Those who have learned to trust in something greater than their wealth, strength, or intelligence would be the only ones able to navigate the storm without being consumed by it. While cities would turn into battlegrounds of conflict and destruction, the fate of humanity would not be decided solely by those who control technology or possess the most advanced weapons, but by those who can discern the times and find refuge where most failed to look. Since the first nuclear bomb was detonated, humanity has entered a new era in which mass destruction is no longer a distant possibility, but an imminent risk. The advancement of military technology has placed the decision to initiate a nuclear conflict in the hands of a few leaders, while its consequences would impact billions. As Ecclesiastes 9:18 states, "Wisdom is better than weapons of war, but one sinner destroys much good." Nations have been driven by the pursuit of superiority and the illusion that power guarantees security. But history has proven that the more man relies on his own strength, the closer he is to ruin. The possibility of a nuclear confrontation is not solely based on hostile intentions, but on miscalculations, automatic retaliations, and rushed decisions made in the chaos of global conflict. The world has become a chessboard where every political and military move can trigger a domino effect of unpredictable consequences. The arms race, far from being a relic of the past, continues to shape alliances and rivalries among nations competing for influence and strategic control. As Matthew 26 recounts, when Peter attempted to defend Christ with a sword, Jesus warned, "For all who draw the sword will die by the sword." The cycle of violence always returns to those who initiate it, and this reality is even more severe when applied to the destructive potential of nuclear weapons. If a single missile were launched, the logic of war would demand an equivalent response, leading to an unprecedented escalation. It would not take long before the world found itself plunged into an apocalyptic scenario, where the desire for victory would inevitably result in mutual destruction. The human impact of a nuclear attack would be immediate and irreversible. Entire cities would vanish in seconds. Entire populations would be vaporized before even realizing what had happened. Those who survived the initial blast would face lethal levels of radiation, leading to illnesses that would persist for generations. As Zechariah 14:12 describes, speaking of the day of the Lord's wrath, "Their flesh will rot while they are still standing on their feet, their eyes will rot in their sockets, and their tongues will rot in their mouths." The horror of such an attack goes beyond what the human mind can comprehend. And yet, humanity continues marching toward this possibility, driven by greed, the thirst for power, and the inability to learn from the past. Those who place their trust in nations and their rulers ignore that the human heart, without divine guidance, is inclined toward evil and self-destruction. The environmental damage caused by a nuclear attack would make the Earth itself an uninhabitable place. The phenomenon known as nuclear winter would block sunlight for months or even years, drastically lowering temperatures and crippling global food production. Water sources would become undrinkable, soil would be poisoned, and the air would carry lethal radioactive particles. As Revelation 8:10-11 describes, a catastrophic event would turn many waters bitter, and many would die from drinking the poisoned water. This would not simply be a war between nations, but the destruction of the very foundations of life on Earth. What mankind designed for its defense would quickly turn against it, transforming supposed technological superiority into the cause of its own downfall. The psychological impact of a post-nuclear world would be devastating. Fear would become a permanent state, and society without structure would regress to a primitive stage where the instinct for survival dictated the rules. As Isaiah 24:1-3 describes, "See, the Lord is going to lay waste the earth and devastate it. He will ruin its face and scatter its inhabitants." The moral collapse would be as deep as the physical collapse, for when hope fades, man surrenders to despair. Belief in stability and progress would crumble in the face of a world without order, without a future, and without any guarantee of reconstruction. There would be no victors, only survivors struggling to endure among the ruins of what was once called civilization. Humanity walks a dangerous threshold, where every decision could be the tipping point for irreversible destruction. While many see military technology as a shield of protection, they forget that the greatest threat does not lie in arsenals, but in the hearts of those who control them. As Luke describes, the real danger is not just in what can kill the body, but in what can destroy the soul. And if nations can no longer control their own fate, what can be said of those who unknowingly follow the same path toward the unknown? Preparation for times of crisis is not just a matter of material strategy, but of spiritual discernment. History has proven that great civilizations that ignored the signs of collapse were caught off guard when the unexpected became reality. As Proverbs 22:3 states, "The prudent see danger and take refuge, but the simple keep going and pay the penalty." Preparation, therefore, is not an act of fear, but of wisdom. In today's world, where geopolitical and technological instabilities threaten global order, ignoring the signs is like building a house on sand. Just as Joseph in Egypt was instructed by God to store provisions for the years of famine, Genesis 41:34-36, we too are called to act with prudence, establishing strategies for sustenance and protection when difficult times come. Surviving in a collapse scenario requires more than just storing food and basic supplies. True resilience comes from adaptability and the formation of structured communities capable of withstanding adversity. As Ecclesiastes 4:9-10 states, "Two are better than one. If either of them falls down, one can help the other up." Individualism cannot be the answer in the face of chaos. Small, organized groups can share essential skills such as food production, first aid, and defense, ensuring that everyone has what they need to endure. In times of scarcity, the spirit of cooperation surpasses the mindset of isolated survival. The collapse of modern society will demand more than physical strength. It will require discernment, strategy, and a collective commitment to preserving life and order. Strong communities are built on solidarity and the willingness of each individual to contribute what they have. Just as the early church in Acts 2:44-45 shared possessions and resources so that no one was in need, preparing for times of crisis involves creating support networks where people do not seek only their own safety, but also ensure that others have what they need. The model of the early church was not merely a mutual aid system, but a reflection of an unshakable faith in difficult times. This same mindset can be applied to times of global instability. Selfishness and fear destroy societies, but cooperation and service to others generate hope, even when everything seems to be falling apart. True strength is not found in the accumulation of goods, but in the ability to build an environment where everyone has the means to endure what is coming. Faith plays a crucial role in these moments. When human structures fail, it is trust in God that keeps people steadfast. As Isaiah 26:3 assures, "You will keep in perfect peace those whose minds are steadfast, because they trust in you." Amid collapse, a person's greatest resource will not be what they possess, but the peace that governs their heart. Many who place their security in material wealth will quickly realize that money, gold, and even supplies are not enough to bring emotional and spiritual stability. Faith is the only anchor that withstands chaos. Those who cultivate it not only find strength to endure difficult times, but also become a light for those consumed by fear. Resilience in the midst of crisis depends on a mindset prepared to face challenges without losing a sense of purpose. As Paul states in Philippians 4:12-13, he learned to live in both abundance and scarcity because his strength came from God. Adversity is not just a test of endurance, but an opportunity for growth. Crisis will reveal who is grounded in something solid and who has built their life on fleeting illusions. Those who grow stronger through difficulties are the ones who understand that suffering does not define their destiny. It is their response to it that does. Spiritual resilience is not built in the moment of crisis, but is cultivated long before it arrives through a life of faith, gratitude, and trust in divine care. The question is not just about surviving the collapse, but about keeping the essence of humanity alive. Chaos will attempt to reduce people to their most primitive instincts, but those who preserve their faith, morality, and love for others will prove that hope cannot be extinguished by circumstances. As Luke describes, no one lights a lamp and hides it. Instead, they put it on a stand so that those who come in may see the light. And if, in the midst of destruction, there are still those who choose to be light, then perhaps the collapse of modern society will not mark the end, but rather the beginning of something few could have foreseen. Humanity stands at a critical crossroads where the choice between peace and destruction is not solely in the hands of world leaders, but also in the essence of collective decisions. World leaders have the power to prevent devastating conflicts, yet they often succumb to political, economic, and ideological interests that perpetuate division rather than reconciliation. As Proverbs 29:2 states, "When the righteous thrive, the people rejoice. When the wicked rule, the people groan." True leadership is not measured by military strength or financial influence, but by the ability to guide nations toward justice and peace. However, history has shown that without an absolute moral foundation, mankind repeats cycles of destruction, ignoring the warning that real peace cannot be built on arrogance and unchecked power. Technology, although often used to advance warfare, also holds the potential to be a tool for peace and reconstruction. If applied with ethical principles and a humanitarian purpose, it can provide diplomatic solutions and strengthen bonds between nations. As Isaiah 2:4 describes, "They will beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation will not take up sword against nation, nor will they train for war anymore." This vision of a world where technology replaces destruction with creation still seems distant, as humanity tends to shape scientific advancements according to its own interests. However, if the resources invested in weaponry were redirected toward global cooperation initiatives, the impact could transform the geopolitical landscape, promoting sustainable solutions instead of endless conflicts. Artificial intelligence, by processing vast amounts of information and identifying patterns, could serve as an ally in conflict prevention. The analysis of geopolitical, social, and economic data could allow for crisis prediction and diplomatic interventions before disputes escalate into armed conflicts. In Matthew 10, Jesus reminds us that we are sent out as sheep among wolves and must therefore be as shrewd as serpents and as innocent as doves. Prudence requires that we use every available means to anticipate risks and seek solutions before the worst occurs. However, the challenge lies in controlling these tools, as AI reflects the values of its creators. If programmed to serve specific interests rather than the common good, it could become yet another instrument of domination, exacerbating inequalities and intensifying rivalries among nations. The belief that technology alone can solve humanity's problems ignores an essential factor: the moral nature of mankind. No scientific advancement can transform hardened hearts or replace the need for repentance and reconciliation. As Jeremiah 17:9 warns, "The heart is deceitful above all things and beyond cure. Who can understand it?" The true solution to preventing global war is not found solely in diplomacy or technological innovation, but in the willingness to acknowledge past mistakes and break the cycle of hatred and vengeance that fuels conflicts. As long as humanity continues to seek security solely in its own resources, it will remain vulnerable to pride and greed, the very forces that have repeatedly led nations to ruin throughout history. Humanity's hope does not rest in artificial intelligence, peace treaties, or strategic alliances, but in the inner transformation that leads to true peace. Psalm 46:9 declares that God makes wars cease to the ends of the earth. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear. He burns the shields with fire. War is not inevitable because powerful weapons exist. It is inevitable because the human heart is inclined toward conflict. No technology, no matter how advanced, can suppress the desire for domination or prevent corrupt leaders from making destructive decisions. Only a foundation built on unshakable values can lead humanity away from impending collapse. And such values do not come from political theories, but from a profound understanding of life's purpose and the necessity of true justice. If history teaches us anything, it is that civilizations that ignored the signs of the times paid an irreversible price. Humanity now possesses the greatest technological arsenal ever seen, but also the greatest responsibility of all time. As Luke 12:48 states, "To whom much is given, much will be required." The question is not only whether there is still time to react, but whether those in power truly desire to prevent the worst from happening. And what if the answer lies beyond technology and diplomacy? What if the true turning point is already being ignored, not in the grand halls of politics, but in every small decision that leads humanity toward a fate that may already be sealed? If you have read this far, it is because something inside you knows that this message is not just a distant warning. The world is changing before our eyes, and ignoring the signs has never been a wise choice. The great civilizations of the past fell because they believed they would always have more time. But what if that time is already running out? Artificial intelligence can predict trends, calculate probabilities, and project scenarios, but it cannot change the human heart. And that is where the real problem lies. The greatest danger we face today is not just war between nations, but the coldness that has taken hold of human hearts. More and more, we see hatred replacing love, fear extinguishing hope, and greed controlling decisions that affect millions of lives. But the most important question we must ask is not about the fate of the world, but about our own destiny. What are we doing with the time we still have? How are we living the days that remain? If everything changes tomorrow, will you be ready? If this message resonated with you, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here we talk about the truth that many try to hide, and you won't want to miss what comes next. Share this message with someone who needs to hear it today. We don't know how much time we have left, but we know there is still time to make a difference. Now, before we end, I want to say a prayer for you. Lord God, Father of all creation, we come before you at this moment, recognizing that only in you do we find true peace. The world may be heading toward destruction, but those who trust in you will never be shaken. Give us discernment to see beyond the chaos, courage to stand firm, and wisdom to do what is right, even when everything around us seems uncertain. Lord, touch the heart of the person hearing this prayer right now. Renew their mind, strengthen their spirit, and fill them with hope. May they not be overcome by fear, but stand firm in the certainty that you have a greater plan. Deliver us from anxiety, doubt, and despair. May we be a light in the midst of darkness, speaking words of life where there is hopelessness, and spreading your love where there is hatred. Father, may your presence be with us every day. May we be instruments of your peace, seeking what is eternal rather than what is temporary. Guard us, protect our families, and teach us to live according to your will. In Jesus' name, amen. If you received this prayer, write in the comments, "I believe and I am ready." God bless you, and see you in the next video.